Hi, my name is Brittany Krausman, and I'm going to talk to you guys today about anorexia nervosa. So everybody, close your eyes for a second. Imagine that you're standing in a bakery, and not just any bakery, the best bakery in Paris. The room is extremely fragrant, and you can't take your eyes off of the huge cinnamon rolls and the croissants and the glazed donuts and the ice cakes and the delicious cookies. Every counter holds a big basket of baguettes, fresh from the oven, and they're warm and steaming. You're hungry, even starving. The hunger eats at your insides like a tornado whirling in your chest. It feels as though the hunger is clawing at your insides. You stand staring at the glass and try to swallow, but your throat is so dry that you can't manage to. You want more than anything in the world to taste the sweet pastries and end the horrible burning in your stomach. You see the man beside you bite into one of those perfectly warm baguettes, and you breathe in the yeasty smell, and you can almost taste what he's eating. But you can't, because it's been months or years since you've eaten a piece of bread. Although you can feel every bone in your body scraping against your insides, you can't eat because you guys can open your eyes. You can't eat because you will risk ending the control that you have by not eating and controlling what goes into your body, and you'll risk being the person that you never wanted to become again. This is what it's like to have a very severe case of anorexia nervosa. According to the DSM-5 criteria, to be diagnosed with anorexia nervosa, you must display persistent restriction of energy intake leading to significantly low body weight in context of what is minimally expected for your age and sex and the way that you're developing and your physical health. You must have either an intense fear of gaining weight or becoming fat, or persistent behavior that interferes with your weight gain. You can have disturbance in the way that your body is or the way that you're shaped, and you have undue influence of body shape and weight on self-evaluation. You have persistent lack of recognition of the seriousness of the current low body weight that you have. And then according to the National Eating Disorder Association, boys are about half as likely as girls to develop this disorder, so I'm just going to be talking about girls today, even though it does happen for boys too. In adults, a BMI of under 17.5 is a pretty clear indication that you have an eating disorder. BMI takes into account both your weight and your height, so it's not 100% accurate on your overall health, but this is what can be used in most cases to tell the health of a person. In the United States, at least 30 million people of all ages and genders suffer from an eating disorder, according to a survey done for the Book of Biological Psychiatry. Eating disorders have the highest mortality rate out of any mental illness, with at least one person dying in the world every 62 minutes as a result from it. Eating disorders affect all races and ethnic groups and genders, with genetics, environmental factors, and personality traits all combining to create the risk for it. Today I am going to discuss the causes, effects, the symptoms, and the preventative measures that go along with anorexia. Causes of anorexia. One of the major factors is bodily dissatisfaction and thin ideal internalization. So this is a very, I think, kind of a popular picture. If you were to type in too skinny model or anorexia, this is the picture that's going to come up, because she's just kind of known as like she's the problem, because you can see every bone in her body and it's really scary. Society puts a large emphasis on the concept that thin is beautiful and that women should be thin. This is especially apparent in the modeling industry, which teenagers seem to turn to for rules on how to look, eat, act, diet, exercise, and much more. Many of these models have been photoshopped to have unrealistically thin bodies, and some of them just, as you can see naturally, do have some of these unrealistically thin bodies. A frightening example of this is model Susanna Buchwald, who broke her silence about her eating disorder. She said, "I was very weak, down all the time. I lost my period for 3 years. I had problems with my teeth, my complexion was gray, my skin was dry. It was a terrible experience." She says this as a part of the video series Real Women, Real Stories. And even though I beat both disorders, she said, even now I have a very emotional relationship with food. Her agents told her to stop eating and to exercise excessively to lose weight quickly, and this spiraled her into anorexia for 4 years, which is really, really sad. The photographs of this model most likely inspired young women to diet even more until they looked the same, because young girls want to look like these models that they see in the magazines. Social media plays a huge role in developing anorexia for teens. Many of these teens simply become interested in dieting as a whole, not necessarily because of this, but just because it's something that is going to make them feel good. And then they end up restricting the calories too much, and it spirals out of control, and then they restrict it completely, and that leads to death. Family support deficits can play a key role in the development of this disease as well. Teenagers who feel trapped in a relationship with their parents sometimes try to form a separate identity from an over-involved parent, so they try to exert independence and autonomy by controlling what they put into their body. Research also indicates that families of individuals with eating disorders tend to be overprotective, perfectionists, rigid, and focused on success. And the success is typically external, so such as trophies and grades and maybe even body image, stuff like that, external rewards. Many children from these kinds of families try to achieve the appearance of success by being thin and attractive, even though they do not actually feel successful, according to psychologist Bridget Dingle. Some individuals with eating disorders live in or came from families that exhibit dysfunctional or negative behaviors such as alcohol and drug use, and it's very common as well for these people who develop these disorders to experience family trauma, such as someone passing away that they didn't expect to pass away, or sexual abuse or neglect, things like that. Next slide. Moving into the major symptoms of this disorder. According to the National Eating Disorder Association, there are numerous emotional, behavioral, and physical symptoms for anorexia. Moving into the emotional and behavioral symptoms, lots of girls will wear multiple huge layers of clothes so that you can't see all of their bones that they know are poking out, and just because they're so cold from not having enough nutrition. They're preoccupied with food and calories. Many people will carry around nutrition books where they write down every single thing they eat, or like calorie dictionaries so that they know what they're putting into their bodies and they can write it in their journals. They often set certain rules, so it'll start out with something small, like restricting your carb intake, and then from there it'll get into something a little bit scarier, like cutting up your food into tiny pieces before you eat it, and then it turns into every single bite you eat you have to chew 50 times before you swallow it. And then it turns into you can only eat half of the food that your parents put on your plate. You can't eat any more than that. So these things kind of spiral and they get worse and worse until complete restriction happens. These people often complain of cold intolerance and they're very lethargic just because of the lack of energy. It's common for these people to cook extravagant meals using lots of high-calorie foods like for their family, but then they make excuses about why they can't eat it, such as that they already ate, or they feel sick, or tired, or they are going to eat later, stuff like that. And lastly, for this behavioral symptom, they will often have very rigid exercise plans that they do every day, regardless of how terrible they feel for not eating. Every single day, they do the same things, and they strive to burn off more calories than they took in, because that's supposedly how you lose weight. Physically, many gastrointestinal complaints will come from the person who has this disorder, such as constipation and abdominal pain, and then menstrual irregularities, such as the girl who lost her period for 3 years, difficulty concentrating, dizziness, sleep problems, dry skin and nails, thinning of hair, muscle weakness, and impaired immune functioning are also very common. Next slide. So on to effects. Again, the highest mortality rate of any mental illness is anorexia nervosa, which is somewhere over 4% according to the National Eating Disorder Association. 1 in 5 deaths from these people who have anorexia is by suicide, because it is very heavily correlated with other mental diseases. 0.9% of American women suffer from anorexia in their lifetime. That's almost 1 in 100 women. That's a lot. Just in the celebrities who make headlines, here are some examples. Perhaps the first recognized case was that of Karen Carpenter in the early 80s, an anorexic who relied on vomiting to get rid of the food that she intook, and she died of heart failure. Years later, she was followed by Christina Henrich, a world-class gymnast, who is this lady here, who died in 1994. Anna Mason, a famous Brazilian model, died in 2006, and Isabelle Perrault, a French actress and model, succumbed to the disease in 2010. There are just a few of these celebrities who have died from this disease, but there are thousands of girls and boys out there who have died as well, but just didn't make the headlines, and we don't know about them. If they survive, the long-term effects are also very scary because this disease has messed with their organs and they might not function as well, and they do have long-term effects physically, and they will never forget what they went through just emotionally from this. Next slide. Preventative measures. I think one of the scariest things about this illness is the Proana websites that you can find online. If you search Proana, you'll get all these websites where it's kind of fellow anorexics. They'll kind of try to motivate each other to keep going, and they'll give each other ideas. So it's like a blog type thing, and they'll comment on each other's posts, and they'll say like, you can do it, you just like, we just want to be thin, you know. And it's really scary because they're making each other do it more. So up there in the red it says Anna by choice, and on her computer it says, I feel so alone in this, but on the computer she feels like people are there for her. So to prevent this, a law passed in 2015 in France banning the use of unhealthily thin fashion models has now 2 years later come into effect, which is a great example of the change that needs to happen here. Models will need to provide a doctor's certificate attesting to their overall physical health with special regard to BMI. Employers breaking this law could face fines up to 75,000 euros and 6 months in jail, according to BBC News. The doctor's note will be valid for 2 years, according to Huffington Post Canada, which also reported on the new law. If a model's BMI falls below 18.5, they'll be classified as underweight and at risk for health problems, and they will not be able to walk. According to France's new law, which started in October, digitally retouched photos will require a label kind of in the back, in the shadows, which translates to retouched photograph. France's Minister of Social Affairs and Health, in a statement reported by French media, says, exposing young people to normative and unrealistic images of bodies leads to a sense of self-depreciation and poor self-esteem that can impact health-related behavior. Though it is too early to tell the true outcome of this law on the 600,000 people in France who suffer from an eating disorder, it's likely to have a large impact on people. So in conclusion, eating disorders are extremely frightening. They again have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. They've killed so many people, and lots of times you just don't know that the person sitting next to you has one. So to prevent this, we can look to our family, and we can look to changing the social media like France is trying to do and like some other countries are trying to do. And we can just raise awareness and be able to help these people by not telling them that they're wrong and they're crazy, but by trying to reason with them because they're kind of in an impaired state of mind through this. Thank you.